you. Rand, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rand Cook, and I'm the chair of the Neskowin CAC. Thanks to all of you for taking the time and making the effort to be here this evening. Enrollment of 107 is the largest to date in our series of informational town halls. And in addition, our sign up for email updates is now over 650, up from roughly 400 this fall. So many thanks are in order for everyone's getting involved and participating. Thanks for being here. So the number one goal of land use planning is public participation, and we take that seriously. Tonight, we welcome our panelists who come from a variety of areas of expertise, and we thank them for presenting on these subjects related to goals 5 and 6. We recognize there are more elements in 5 and 6 that are not covered this evening, and we will do our best to wrap those into other goals that may overlap and provide context that can cover the ocean, dunes, historical sites, buildings, and other areas not specifically covered in tonight's discussion. Agenda items have links in blue to more, the one that we sent out, they have links in blue to more information on presenters' subjects. Documents shared tonight will migrate to the website under resource and archive at some point. So please follow up to look more in depth to what our presenters have brought to the table. With that, let me introduce our moderator, Sarah Absher, head of the Community Development Department at Tillamook County, who will introduce goals 5 and 6. Sarah?
Thank you, Rand. Good evening, everyone. It is so nice to see you again. And thank you for giving me the opportunity not only to moderate, but to share with you a little bit about goals 5 and 6. So because especially goal 5 is so extensive, Brenda, I'm actually going to set my timer as well, because I'm going to do my best to wrap this up in 10 minutes. And at the end of tonight's town hall meeting, I'm happy to answer any questions, but to make sure we have time for our panelists and follow-up questions for them. When I'm done, we'll jump right into Ed Wallmark's presentation. So goal 5, what is goal 5? Goal 5 is an inventory of resources that are important to Tillamook County that require protection and planning for long-term use and preservation. There are roughly over a dozen resources listed that are inventoried that range from wildlife habitat to historic places and gravel quarries or mining quarries. The creation of the inventory for Tillamook County, and this might be a fun trivia question for golf course clubhouse trivia at a later date, but Tillamook County is roughly 713,600 acres. So when we started looking at the inventory for goal 5 of these resources back in the 70s, that essentially was the area that we looked at. Those inventories include of resources include riparian corridors, wetlands, fish and wildlife habitat, federal wild and scenic rivers, state scenic waterways, groundwater resources, recreation trails, natural areas, wilderness areas, mineral and aggregate sites, energy sources, cultural areas, and then we also look at historic resources, open space, scenic values, and sites. So that's quite an inventory. That's over a dozen categories of areas in that over 713,000 acres that we looked at in the 70s for the creation of our goal 5 element. And again, these are areas that Tillamook County felt required protection and additional planning for long-term use and preservation. So with that, there are inventoried sites in the comp plan. Some of the inventoried sites only lie within the goal 5 element. And one of those examples would be your quarries. So we have several quarries throughout Tillamook County. These are listed as an important resource that require Goal 5 protection because we need quarries to sustain us economically into the future. We use quarries for a variety of things. Most notably, that's where our roads come from. With the repairs of the jetties, there is a quarry in Tillamook County that helps provide the rock for the jetty repairs of the Tillamook Bay Jetty. Historic resources and cultural areas, historic structures, there are several in South County. Most notably, you would see these as the old creamery building sites that were once part of a creamery that was in Cloverdale or Orrtown. But it can also be other sites inventoried that include Indian burial areas. It can be scenic waterways where the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or the Oregon Department, or excuse me, the Oregon State Historical Preservation Office come into play. Energy sources, the county recognized early on that our county is heavily dependent upon fossil fuels and hydroelectric power to supply our energy needs, and that essentially all energy to our county is imported. So there's several goals and policies that outline steps that Tillamook County should be taking in the future to consider all energy sources that might be viable sources for Tillamook County. Recreation is an important part of our county, and so there are specific trails that fall under the Goal 5 inventory. Likewise, areas of big game and fur. And so with that, there are protections built into the planning program and coordination that we often do with agencies like the Department of Forestry to help us make sure as we're reviewing development proposals that this resource, this area that they need is protected and how we can protect it. Wetlands, riparian corridors, and also areas prone to hazards can be inventoried in Goal 5. What we find is a substantial amount of crossover between the Goal 5 element and other elements of the comprehensive plan. Most notably, those would be the hazard elements, the recreation element, the shoreline element, and the estuarine element. Most of our areas, if they are not inventoried as Goal 5 protected wetlands and riparian corridors in Goal 5, where we see those most notably is in the shoreline element and the estuarine element. And that's where those additional protections come into play for a lot of those areas that we want to see protected. And going off of reiterating what Ran and Brenda had said earlier, we will come back to that discussion at a later date when we talk more in depth about those resources and those comp plan elements. With that, we have several scenic areas that are inventoried in the Goal 5 element. Probably some of the most notable would be Cape Kiwanda, but then also Bay Ocean Spit, Cape Lookout. So there's a lot of areas that are also included in this inventory. The policies for protection of these resources not only are listed in the goal elements through those policies, but also through implementing ordinances of the Tillamook County Land Use Ordinance. So as we've talked before about when we're looking at updating the Neskowin Community Plan, what's really important to go with those updated policies in the community plan are the implementing ordinances that we find in the land use ordinance to make sure that the goals and objectives and those policies within your community plan are upheld, that future development is consistent with those goals and policies. We see that also through our land use ordinance underlying zones. So when we talk about preservation of open space, preservation of big fur game habitat, when we look at protection of our wetlands and our natural features, we're looking at our farm and forest zones, we're looking at our recreation management zones, and we're looking at our estuary zones. Those zones really, by the uses that are allowed outright, conditionally, and then the development standards that accompany each of those zones and potential uses. That is really where you see those policies outlined in the Goal 5 element, among others, carried out and upheld. With that, we have supplemental sections of the land use ordinance that contain development standards that must be met. Those include your riparian setbacks from lakes, rivers, creeks, and streams. It includes requirements for development standards that must be met if you're developing in a geologic hazard area. And so we see those different ways. Another one is through the freshwater wetland section of our ordinance, as well as requirements for protected scenic sites and structures through the historical preservation section of our ordinance, which talks about who we need to work with and what approvals are required for those historic structures, and then also our scenic waterways. Modification to these inventories and policies do occur on occasion. To date, most commonly what we've seen is as our quarries have expanded because they've needed to due to use, most of our quarries have what's called a Goal 5 protection. And what that means that in those areas where those quarries are located, the quarry is the resource that is protected, not the adjacent uses, primarily residential or commercial uses that may be proposed to be developed around those quarries. And so when that happens, we actually have to go through a text amendment process, and sometimes even a goal exception process, to update those inventoried lists or to make changes to them. But if you haven't had an opportunity to look through there, there's the inventoried sites for structures and for scenic inventoried areas. It's quite interesting. With that, there's several policies related to protection of each one of those resources. As far as the Goal 6 element, so the Goal 6 element is really what I think of as our local, state, and federal coordination element. Brenda, I'll wrap it up. We rely heavily, primarily, on state agencies like the Department of Environmental Quality to help us make sure that federal and state laws related to air quality, water quality, noise pollution, that we are on track. York Johnson from the Department of Environmental Quality, who is one of our local field reps, is someone that we work closely with, as I'm sure Garshaw and Guy will talk about later, with water quality and testing. Mr. McCall, David McCall from Public Works, solid waste. There are provisions about solid waste management, and then also on-site septic systems and wastewater treatment facilities. Some of that which also comes through our office through our on-site sanitation program, and Chris Kiola, who is our environmental program manager. So the purpose of these two goal elements is really about inventorying and then protecting those natural resources that we have identified that are critical to the sustainability of Tillamook County for various reasons, not only for environmental protection and water quality, but also for continued growth and economic sustainability. So I will end there. Thank you. So our first panelist, it's my pleasure to introduce Ed Wallmark. For those of you that have been around for a while, I think Ed and I visited Neskowin in about 2008 to talk about forests and wildfire protection. So Ed, welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Sarah. Hey, good evening, everyone. I'll try to get this done in 10 minutes. That buzzer scared the heck out of me. So anyways, I always say too, it's really nice to meet in person. These Zoom meetings always get me more nervous than talking in front of 100 people, it seems like. So a few things. I think what I'm going to do, I don't want to share my screen or anything. I'm just going to give out a website for everybody to peruse later on. It's www.firewise.org. And that's going to cover a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about here in our short 10 minutes. And it has a lot of good graphics, things to talk about, like limbing up your trees, cleaning up the stuff around your house, and that kind of thing. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to give a quick overview on the 2020 fires. As we know, it was a pretty bad fire season, just like 2020 in essence was a pretty bad year. And we'll talk about defensible space. And I want to plug our yard debris program that we have with Department of Forestry and Tillamook County Solid Waste Department, David McCall. And then I want to talk about some home assessments that our department gives free of charge, and give some information on that in case folks want myself and my staff to come out and look at your place and give recommendations. So, all right. So like I said, my name is Ed Wallmark. I'm the Protection Unit Forester here in Tillamook. I've been with the department since 1998. Fought fires all over the Western United States and around, even here, unfortunately. And, Labor Day was a really tough year for us. It's a really tough, not year, but week, 2-week period. Locally here, we had the Pike Road fire, which was 301 acres, and that was right behind the Bay City, Idaville area. And then close to the Neskowin area, of course, there was the Echo Mountain fire, which was about 2,500 acres plus. All started about the same time during that wind event that we had on Labor Day evening. Drew a lot of resources, and it was just, all hands on deck kind of thing. And what I want to cover, though, on some of that stuff with the statewide fires, though, for 2020, there were 5,000 plus homes and businesses destroyed. We had nine fatalities. We lost pretty much the whole town of Talent and the Phoenix area out of Southern Oregon. And of course, the Detroit Sandy Am Canyon area. We lost our ODF office there in Lyons. And then the Blue River McKenzie area was just devastated. So a lot of the homes, and I mean, if you've ever been down even in the Otis area and driving around through there, just devastating. So that's just kind of the point I want to drive home, is the importance of defensible space. It really woke me up just living in this county my whole life, being on the west side of the state, and just it's time to be aware of that. And the time is perfect right now to clean up your house. So basically, the most important thing you can probably do right off the bat is it's called that intermediate zone right next to your home, and it's that 0 to 5 foot zone. And that's talking about cleaning out your gutters, which is never fun, but and taking that firewood away from the side of your house, cleaning up the place. That's probably the most important thing folks can do right now. And what happens is it's the ember. I always say, remember the ember. It's kind of a little slogan, but the ember is what happens, and it needs a receptive fuel bed like your gutters and all that debris and litter, fine litter that's all around your house. So if you can clean that stuff up first, that's a big help. Some other things too, we have a yard debris program, which is great, and it starts May 1st and it goes through September 30th. And normally that's in our burn ban time of the year, where we don't want folks to burn, and for obvious reasons. And so you can take up to 9 cubic yards per visit to your local transfer station. And that's going to be down in Pacific City for your folks. And you can take up to 9 cubic yards, and there's a voucher available. And I think they just have it there at the transfer station. So you just have to show up with it. But please don't show up until May 1st on that. But perfect opportunity to clean up your place free of charge on that. And like I was also saying, we want to come out and do home assessments for you. I have staff available, come out, do that before the summertime. We can give we do a little write-up. We can give some ideas on how to kind of just make your place defensible and all that. So I don't know on the agenda, you might have, my email might be out there, but I'll put it out. So if folks want my email, it's probably easiest to contact me by phone, and I'll give you my phone number. So my phone number is 503-815-7050. And you can call me on my direct line and schedule an appointment. And my email is edward.h.wallmark@oregon.gov. And my last name is spelled Wallmark. And that's probably the easiest way we can schedule an appointment, and we can come out there and we have a good conversation and see what your individual needs are for your home. Like I said, with just with the changing climate and everything that's been going on and with fires in the last 10 years, things aren't getting better for us. So I think that's the best thing we can do for homeowners, is get out there and do some prevention. Like I said, now is the time to do it. So anyways, yeah, I wish I could show the website and kind of go over some more things, but I don't want to share my screen and destroy the whole meeting. So like I said, there's some really good information in those pamphlets. And like I said, if we come out there and visit with you on site, we'll bring these with us too and review everything as well. So I'm available, and feel free to give me a call or email, and we'll come out there and see you. So, yeah, there's my contact. Yeah, perfect. That's it. I saw the contact info on the chat. So, okay, can you please repeat my contact? You bet. So my phone number is 503-815-7050. And my email is edward.h.wallmark, WALLMARK, @oregon.gov. So with that, so how do we want to handle it? So you want me to just go ahead and answer the questions that are popping up on the chat, Sarah, or?
I would defer to Rand.
How do you want me? Okay.
Rand, you're on mute.
You want me to do Rand?
Chris, go ahead, and I'll be ready for the next one.
Okay. No, I just wanted to remind folks, if they have any questions for Ed, please put them in the chat box.
All right, we're looking, okay. Yes, we still have copies of the landscaping guide, and I think that is actually, that is online through Oregon State Extension Service. So just Google, the easiest way would be to Google that. We've ran out of copies of those, unfortunately, but I think the easiest way is to get them online now. That is a good publication. Okay, we got the contact info.
Yeah, I don't see anything else there.
So if we have a wooded lot with no home, should you do any mitigation? That's a great question. You know, yeah, I would say it depends on the situation. I mean, it's especially if you have, yes, I would say it'd be good to do some mitigation. If you had neighbors next door and your lot is unmaintained, you wouldn't want a fire to start on that lot and race towards your neighbor's house. So, and there'd probably be liability associated with that too. So it'd always be good to have your place in ship shape. How much are the green address signs? Great question. I don't know. We have to defer that to the rural fire department. Probably Chief Aider down there would be able to tell us that, but I know they have them available. How much value does a metal roof give us for wildfires? That's a good question. And a metal roof is it's the difference between your house surviving a catastrophic wildfire or not. A roof, the roof is a big deal. So we don't want to see like cedar shakes, roofs, material, that kind of thing. Composite and metal is preferred. So a metal roof is the best. Yeah, I think that's most of the questions there, I think. So,
All right.
like I said, any more questions, shoot them my way via email. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Ed. Sarah?
Sure, thank you, Rand. So next on our list is County Commissioner David Yamamoto. Thank you for joining us this evening, Commissioner, and we'll give you the floor.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks very much for inviting me here. Ed, I just want to say to you especially, and to all firefighters in the state of Oregon, I mean, the state of Oregon owes the Oregon Department of Forestry a great benefit. I mean, you guys do great work. We don't want BLM, nor do we want U.S. Forest Service fighting our fires. Oregon Department of Forestry is absolutely the best when it comes to fighting fires. And again, I just want to say thank you so much for everything you've done. I really do. So I am Tillamook County Commissioner Dave Yamamoto, also chair of the Council of Forest Trust Land Counties. There are 15 trust land counties in the state of Oregon, and those are counties with state forest land in them. So we deal with the Department of Forestry on a regular basis. I read over a Green New Deal proposal, and I do see some issues with it. And it's rather new. It's almost brand new. I think it came out in 2021. So I'm still digesting it. But I think I'd just like to take my 10 minutes to talk about the major benefits of sustainable forestry. It must be understood that jobs in the woods, our mills and truck transportation are some of our rural counties' best paying jobs. And they're fully benefited family wage jobs. These family wage jobs contribute significantly to the social stability in trust counties, and especially in Tillamook County. In most trust counties, these jobs pay significantly more than the county average wage and pay about twice as much as jobs in the tourism section. So I want to go over just a few statistics with you. These statistics come from the State of Oregon Employment Department, and these are the most recent numbers I have, and they're the annual average wage for 2019. And I'll first want to go over the state of Oregon. I want to compare the state of Oregon with Tillamook County. So the total private sector average wage job in the state of Oregon is just over $54,000 a year. That same total private sector average wage job in Tillamook County is just under $40,000 a year. And yet let's look at the forest products industry. Let's look at forestry and logging. In the state of Oregon, that's almost $54,000 a year. In Tillamook County, that's about $53,500 a year. Let's look at wood products manufacturing. These are mill jobs. In the state of Oregon, almost $52,000 a year. In Tillamook County, almost $59,000 a year. And let's look at truck transportation, how we get the logs out of the forest and into the mill, and then from the mill to market. In the state of Oregon, it's about $55,000 a year. In Tillamook County, it's almost $49,000 a year. And again, you must understand these are family wage, fully benefited jobs. And then let's just take a quick look at leisure and hospitality. In the state of Oregon, it pays almost $24,000 a year. And yet in Tillamook County, it pays $23,500 a year. So when you, and this revenue that comes into Tillamook County from these forestry style jobs gets turned over again and again and again in Tillamook County as it's spent and respent within the county. So that's one of the basic issues of forestry in Tillamook County. Then people talk about timber revenue. And Tillamook County does very well when it comes to timber revenue. In the past 2 years, Tillamook County has received well over $20 million a year in timber revenue. And people think the county is rich. What are you doing with all that money? Well, people don't understand that 3/4 of the timber revenue that we get from the Department of Forestry immediately gets written out in checks from our treasurer. And it goes back to special districts within the county. The school districts, the 911 center, soil and water conservation, fire departments in Tillamook County, and many, many more. There are over 20 special districts. Community college is part of that. There are over 20 special districts in Tillamook County, and they get 3/4 of the revenue that we receive on state forest lands. So yes, we do rely on that money a lot. Public works is another area that I want to have a quick conversation with people about. Chris Lady today has a workforce of 12 to 13 people in public works. It wasn't more than a decade or two ago that we had over 50 people in public works. And that decrease has come because of the decrease in timber revenue in Tillamook County. Now, most of the public works jobs are paid for through federal timber harvest, BLM land, and U.S. Forest Service. And if you look at what they're cutting today, it's almost nothing. Public works today is almost strictly general fund money. When we instituted the TLT, the transient lodging tax, Tillamook County could do anything it wanted with 30% of the transient lodging tax dollars that came into Tillamook County. At that point, and I think it was a great decision, I would never want to change this, 1/3 of the transient lodging tax revenue goes to public works to help maintain our roads. Today, that's over $1 million a year. It's very sad to say that that $1 million a year that we give to public works from transient lodging tax dollars, that's 1/4 of public works overall budget. Very, very sad indeed. So now I want to move on, talk a little bit about carbon sequestration, because that's one of the things that a Green New Deal proposal talks about. When it comes to carbon sequestration, Tillamook County is blessed to have one of the best carbon sequestration models in the world. And that is our state and federal forest. We grow trees in Oregon like nowhere else on earth. So people say, well, fine, you just need to leave the trees there, don't cut them, and carbon sequestration is a great thing. Well, the way we do things, when you do sustainable forestry, you go in, you harvest timber. We're required in Oregon to replant within 3 years. Well, guess what? The fastest uptake of carbon in our forest is with younger forests. That carbon sequestration is very rapid. As the forests grow and age, that carbon sequestration slows down. And so we go back in and we harvest again, and it starts that rapid carbon sequestration event all over again. One of the things that most people don't think about is the fact that the finished wood products, look around you, the cabinets in your home, the studs in your walls, the plywood that's holding up everything, the roofing in many instances, that is carbon sequestered in wood products. Just because you harvest a tree doesn't mean that carbon goes away. That carbon is turned into working wood products, which we build homes and businesses with, and that carbon stays sequestered in that wood, which is a terrific thing. But people say, so let's not cut our forests. Well, so what are we going to build our homes out of? So we would have to build our homes out of concrete or steel or plastic products. Those definitely are not environmentally friendly building materials. The other issue is going to be that if we don't cut and provide forest products to the United States, that means that other countries are going to be deforesting their own forests. For every acre of Northwest Oregon forest that is set aside from harvest, 5 to 10 plus acres of less productive, less regulated, higher impact acres will be cut somewhere else in the world. We do a great job with sustainable forestry here in the United States. And I don't think it's something that we want to lose for many, many good reasons. I want to go back to what Ed was talking about earlier and talk just a little bit about forest fires. We cannot stop forest fires, but we can, with proper forest management, we can prevent many of these forest fires from becoming conflagrations, which is what we're seeing all across the Western United States now. These forest fires are turning into conflagrations, burning up hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres of prime forest land. And it's just not a good scenario. Right now, what's happening is that the Department of Forestry has developed a plan to reforest large burn areas in the state of Oregon. And there are those that think that reforestation is not necessary. They don't want that to be done. They say that nature will take care of itself. One of the biggest issues when it comes to reforestation is evident right here in Tillamook County. We have to remember the big burn, which happened in the 30s and 40s and early 50s. Huge fires roaring through the Coast Range. It's a great example. Most of us aren't old enough to remember this. But as school kids, many kids were taken out of school or during the summer were taken up into the forest to replant our forests. One of the largest reforestation projects ever to happen. And yet today, this forest is mature and we're trying to harvest it. And one of the issues here is, again, people are saying it's a pristine forest. You shouldn't be cutting the Tillamook State Forest. Again, this is just an example of reforestation at its finest. One of the issues here is there wasn't just one big burn. There were several big burns, again, going from the 30s to the 40s into the early 50s. And that's because we couldn't reforest fast enough. And for natural reforestation to take place, you get a lot of junk wood and you get a lot of weeds and bramble and bushes, which are highly combustible. And it's those areas that weren't immediately reforested that started other major fires. So again, we can't turn back the clock. We can't get the natural forest that we used to have. But over the years, our forestry practices have become better and better and better. And today we have true sustainable forestry. So I'm just going to stop there and answer questions. Do we have, so let me see. What kind of revenue does the county get from the Weyerhaeuser industrial timber property east of Neskowin? And so that just changed hands. And I am, as a matter of fact, going to start having conversations with Weyerhaeuser. I am not a fan of the way that Weyerhaeuser does things. They're a large, huge industrial style a REIT or something like that, and their forestry practices are good. But oftentimes they'll come in and do massive harvests, and then at that point resell the land. At that point, it has to be reforested, it has to be replanted. But oftentimes, with such huge swaths of land taken up, then it's not touched again for another 50 years. And that's not good. You need plantations of trees, doing things in the proper manner, like a Stimson or a Hampton lumber, where they come in and do smaller tracts of harvest and allowing areas that they replant to grow back. And I agree. I'm not a fan of the Weyerhaeuser style. What is the county's position on industrial timber activity in the source water area, like Hawk Creek? So again, if I understand your concerns with Weyerhaeuser, and I have those same concerns, and I am going to be talking with Weyerhaeuser. But again, if you talk to other companies like Hamptons and Stimson in their harvest areas in Tillamook County, they work very, very closely with the water agencies. They make sure there are sufficient setbacks. I know there's been a lot of concern in Oceanside and in Rockaway Beach. Rockaway is a totally different scenario. People think that it's because of the harvest that occurred above Rockaway that they have some water problems there. Well, and it's not exactly true. Their water problems come during the dry summer months when they have to turn on their well fields. And it's a proven fact. We have many, many tests coming from DEQ and others that show that the water that they pump out of the ground is the source of most of their contaminant problems. And it's a very small portion of it comes from forestry. So one other, can you please visit briefly about Working Lands and Waters and the public-private partnership that has been created to support water quality enhancement efforts to help protect our forest watersheds? Absolutely. We have a grassroots organization that I was at the table originally when this grassroots organization was put together. Commissioner Mark Labhart told me that, Dave, you need to come to this meeting. This is going to be important for Tillamook County. It's a grassroots organization of timber companies and dairy farms. The creamery is involved. The fishing industry is involved. We just got together around a huge table and we just asked ourselves, what are the biggest issues that the natural resource industries in Tillamook County face? And we determined early on that was education. We've got so many people coming to this beautiful area to retire that don't understand modern forestry or modern dairy practices or modern commercial fishing practices. And so we took it upon ourselves to do an educational process. I think we've been very, very successful at that. We've provided tours. We take tours of people up into an active timber harvest and onto a modern dairy farm. And we've taken tours of the Whiskey Creek Shellfish Hatchery. And it's amazing. Once people go out and see what we actually do up in the forest or on a modern dairy farm or at the Whiskey Creek Shellfish Hatchery, it's amazing how people understand what's going on. One of the things that I did early on as a new commissioner, new commissioners go through the Association of Oregon Counties County College. It's a 6-month course regimen, and you learn about all sorts of things. At the end of that tour, and so when I first started going to AOC, my mantra was, when it comes to clean water and habitat restoration and fish recovery, no Oregon county does this better than Tillamook County. And as you can imagine, when I first said that at AOC, eyes were rolling across the room. That's when I decided I wanted to bring my county college class to Tillamook County for a Tillamook Working Lands and Waters tour. So there were over 34 new county commissioners from across the state we brought to Tillamook County. And once they understood and went up into the forest lands and went on a dairy tour and went to the Whiskey Creek Shellfish Hatchery, they were absolutely amazed at what we did. And they knew in their own counties, they were not up to speed like Tillamook County. So it's a great thing that we have here. Again, I continue to tell people when it comes to clean water and habitat restoration and fish recovery, no Oregon county does this better than Tillamook County. And it's the absolute truth. Are we good at what we do? Yes. Should we stop trying to improve what we do? Absolutely not. There are continuing efforts that we're making to improve our practices all around. But I think everyone on this call can be very proud of what we do with natural resources in Tillamook County. Those are all the questions that I see. So again, I want to thank everyone very much for inviting me here. If you have any questions, please give me a call anytime. I'm more than happy to answer questions either at forums like this or just call me in the office. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Brenda, your hand is up.
No, that's actually applause.
Oh,
You guys don't, yeah, you can do, in reactions, you can do applause. At least that's what I thought. Yeah, at least that's what I intended for. So I wanted to applaud. So yeah, let's keep moving on. Next speaker, introduce them.
sure, absolutely. Thank you.
2G.
So talking about the working lands and waters and the public-private partnerships that absolutely include our watershed. We welcome Garshaw and Guy from the Neskowin Sand Lake Watershed Council.
Hello, my name is Garshaw, and I'm the coordinator for the Neskowin and Sand Lake Watersheds Council. Guy, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and then I could take over again?
Yes, I'm Guy Sievert, Neskowin resident and president of the Neskowin Sand Lake Watersheds Council. All yours, Garshaw.
All right, thanks, Guy. So it's Commissioner Yamamoto is a tough act to follow, but I'm going to try to make this quick. We were basically asked to talk about the fish, stream, and wetland resources for Neskowin. 10 minutes is way too short of a time to even get into that. That's a multi-hour discussion. What I want to do is sort of talk about tools that you can use to look at and evaluate these resources yourselves from your home, from the comfort of your own computer. Of course, nothing beats getting out into the field and looking at them yourself. But I just want to take you through a couple of these tools really quickly. These are tools that our Watershed Council uses. So just to back up a little bit, what we do is, a large part of what we do is we implement stream and river restoration projects. And these projects are multi-benefit. They improve infrastructure and economic development, but at the same time, they also improve fish habitat and wildlife. And also what's really important is not necessarily this presentation, but that this information packet that I put together gets disseminated and gets distributed. And I'm hoping Ran or somebody on the committee will be able to put this information on the website. I'm going to go through it really quickly, but hopefully everybody will be able to access it and use it afterwards. Brenda, can I, okay, I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Sorry, I hope you'll stick with me through this screen sharing, but it is a very important part of the presentation. So Sarah obviously is really familiar with this website, but this is the Tillamook County. It's called the GeoMoose. And so the address to get to this website is in that informational packet. But basically, to look at wetlands, what you do is you go to layers, you go to community development, and then you can go to the National Wetlands Inventory. You can look at all different types of wetlands here. You can also look at zoning, where floodway is, so many different things. And again, our Watershed Council uses these tools. So just for everything, for project development, for scoping projects, and for writing grants. They're absolutely integral for our operations, and we couldn't do what we do without them. And so that's looking at wetlands really quickly. And again, there's so many different things you can do with this tool. It's a wonderful tool. You can look at tax lots as well. So moving on, we can also look, this is the OregonExplorer.info. So just going back to the homepage, you go to Tools, the Oregon Explorer Map Viewer, and this is just going to load for a second. Basically, we're going to be looking at fish-bearing streams, and sorry, one second. Internet isn't so good here, but anyway, so we're going to be able to look at streams that support coho populations. You can turn on whichever layer you want. So for this one, you go to restoration. You can go to fish passage barriers. So for example, you can look at culverts. We'll zoom into Neskowin here. So these are all culverts that are fish passage barriers in our watershed, going down to Neskowin. We can also look at fish and wildlife. Let's see, animals and plants, fish distribution, and then we're gonna go to, let's look at coho. And so you can look at, this will be rearing habitat and spawning habitat. There are ways to print these maps as well. Also to say it's all in the informational packet, and my goal here is to sort of just give you the information that you need to look at this information, whether it's for planning, whether it's for developing, or just out of curiosity. That's pretty much all I have for you. I told you I'd keep it short and sweet. Guy, do you have anything to add?
No, not really. And as I said, I think it's the most updated information is always on the county GIS or on Oregon Explorer. And I mean, it's the county really in its documents, like the comp plan, just can't possibly keep up with all the changes in maps and other kinds of things that are happening. So I think as we look at the natural resources in Neskowin, this is the way to do it. If there's anything that the committee would like us to look at, for instance, number of stream miles of habitat or those kinds of things, I mean, we can use those tools and we can kind of give a report on those kinds of things. But other than that, no.
Yeah, we're happy to help out with that. I forgot to mention, also in this informational packet are watershed assessments and analyses that our Watershed Council uses regularly. Every single grant pertaining to Neskowin, we're citing this information. Neskowin area flooding and fish passage assessment. This is sort of a description of flood issues in Neskowin, but also fish passage assessment, how passable these fish barriers are. The Neskowin Watershed Assessment. This is the first comprehensive watershed assessment that we have in our basin. Salmon Neskowin Watershed Analysis, another great watershed analysis of both the Salmon River and Neskowin Creek. And finally, the Nasuka Bay National Wildlife Refuge Comprehensive Conservation Plan and Environmental Assessment. And this will tell you everything that you want to know about Neskowin Marsh, which is part of the Neskowin Bay National Wildlife Refuge. All sorts of wildlife information, fish information, their comprehensive conservation plan, what they have going on in the future. So it's a great document. It's a really long document, so there's a lot to dig into.
I may want to add to that, that document was produced in a typical federal planning process that the community was, Neskowin community was involved in when then the refuge manager for the Oregon coast came to a CAC meeting and talked about their planning process and the plans for the Neskowin marsh area. And of course, that's a critical natural resource in our community. And something, and I guess as we've noticed in the high tide experience that we've had, that sometimes it's not always the most friendly natural resource. But I'm not sure exactly when that, I haven't looked at that report recently, but their plan, I think they have to plan every 10 years for that refuge. And so that might be coming up here in a couple of years. But when it does come up, I think the community should know that they have a role in how that refuge is managed, or a role in the planning process.
Garshaw, if I could interrupt, please, could you go back to the wetland layer of the GIS map? I'd love to tie something into goal 5 here real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that okay, Brendan, Rand? Are you guys okay with that? This is a great chance to talk about something that I think will tie a few things together quite nicely.
Well, this will just segue into the Q&A time. So you got like 6 more minutes before the Q&A ends. So
thank you. So, and thank you, Garshaw, for sharing your time with me. So I think that this is a great example of the partnerships that are important. So Garshaw and I and my staff actually work quite closely together. And Garshaw also works quite closely with Chris Laity, who's the Director of Public Works. We do a lot of permitting together. There's a lot of information and resource sharing. So this map that Garshaw pulled up, which is the NWI, the National Wetlands Inventory layer. And as he pointed out, it's actually under the community development folder. So wetlands are inventoried and listed as a resource in Goal 5, but they are also part of the Goal 16 and the Goal 17 elements, which are estuary and shoreline. So this area that Garshaw has put the map on with, you can see the various shades of blue that highlight the wetland in this area. This area not necessarily is protected under Goal 5. It's actually protected under the shoreline and estuarine elements of the comprehensive plan. So one thing that we have to make sure of is when we're looking at natural resource protection and assessing resource values, there's multiple areas of the comprehensive plan that we are going to go through. And so this is actually an area that we will visit about during the shoreline element conversation and the estuarine element conversation, because as you all know, this area is also tidally influenced. So that's where those estuarine values and priorities also come into play. With that, Guy made an excellent point that information does change rapidly. And so how does the county keep up with this, especially when our inventoried sites have not been looked at for several decades? When you look in the comp plan and you look at how these areas are defined, they are defined by text, meaning language. And the reason why is because when we look at determining the boundaries, which sometimes also then results in additional setback requirements for development to preserve these natural areas and these resources, it requires assistance from agencies like the Department of State Lands, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. The Watershed Councils can get involved because it's a group effort to delineate the boundaries of these resources. And then what we do as planners is we look at those policies that protect these resources when we're assessing and reviewing development proposals to make sure that the development does not end up within these areas unless it is something like a restoration effort or the Neskowin emergency egress route, where those policies allow that type of development. So thank you, Garshaw. More to come on this. We're going to talk about this in an upcoming town hall meeting.
Thank you, Sarah. That was an incredible explanation.
Probably time for one more question if there's a question for the Watershed Council. Otherwise, we'll move on. So last chance for questions.
So I just have to pile on here with Garshaw. This is Commissioner Yamamoto again. When I talk about clean water, habitat restoration, and fish recovery, I couldn't talk about these things without our watershed councils. TEP, Tillamook Estuaries Partners, and the Neskowin Sound Lake Watershed Council both do just incredible work. And I can't talk about these things without the watershed councils. And Garshaw, you and Guy and Alex, you guys lead one of the best watershed councils in the state of Oregon. I congratulate you and thank you for everything that you guys do.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner.
I don't
All right.
questions, so I think we could go to the next speakers and then we'll be right on time.
Great. So our next speaker, Neskowin Water, before it enters the water system, we welcome Steve Rubert from the Neskowin Water Board.
Can you hear me? I'm not very good on this stuff, so thank you for having me. Yeah, I've been on the water board about 8 years now. Our principal source of water, our only source of water, is the Hawk Creek watershed that comes out of the mountains just east of across 101 from us. There are approximately little over 1,100 acres owned by the Nasuka Forest LLC in that area, and another 390 acres that are privately owned at this time. You should be seeing a video, by the way, that was done by Biff Schlichting that shows, well, I don't think he shows my house, so that's okay. But shows the watershed, and upcoming is our water plant. And it gives you an idea of the area we're talking about right now. All total, it's about 1,500 acres that we're looking at that provide the water for Neskowin before it reaches the plant, obviously. A lot of this area, as you can see from here, has been clear cut in the last couple decades, replanted in most cases, if not all. But it is a concern for the water district. In 2012, the district had Trout Mountain Forestry do an evaluation for us of that area. And we did that in response to the DEQ coming out with a statement that for the future, the best thing for coastal water districts was to own our own watershed. That was the only way we could guarantee protection for that water. And so we started to look at it probably about then. That initial assessment was for that 1,100 plus acres was about 4.5 million. At the almost 4,000 an acre, they suggested that 390 is another $1.5 million. So we're talking about $6 million that our little district would have to come up with to purchase all that if it was available, which so far it has been to some extent. We've had talks with private owners and we're hoping to continue that. So what we decided to do as a board about 5 years ago probably was to start seriously looking at ways that we could hopefully, ideally purchase all that area. And second, if we couldn't purchase it, we'd want to enter into agreements on better forest management so that the Hawk Creek would be relatively clean when it reaches the plant. And that's what we've focused on the last several years. We started obviously to see who owns the land. We've had we know who owns it. Getting them to talk to us is it's ongoing. We hired E-Systems, that's Alec and Guy, who to advise us. And we instructed our general manager, Troy Trout, to begin to investigate and enter into conversations with these different owners. And again, to either if they were willing to sell or enter into agreements for good management. Troy, I know, is very on top of the last time there was supposed to be some aerial spraying in our watershed. He contacted the owners and said, we prefer you not do this. This adds too much contaminant. And they backed off to a large degree. So we've been successful in some of that. I'm sorry, I've got notes that probably too many and not organized well enough. We have talked to these owners about good management process. That would be the replanting of trees, of course, but also the corridors along the streams that enter into Hawk Creek to create what's it called, riparian areas that are clean or cleaner, so that when we do have heavy rains, we don't have a lot of runoff. This time of year, our biggest problem for clean rain is probably simply leaves that get into the streams that wash down the stream to the plant, and that they have that has to be cleaned. That's a natural process, so there's not much we can do about that, except back off trees from the river to a certain extent. What we've done after identifying these areas that we would like to purchase, the things we've entered into so far is to we contacted the SDAO, which is the Small Districts Association. They have a lot of work done on this, not just for us, but up and down the coast and all over the state. We're not the only ones that want to secure clean water. What procedures we would have to go through, what are the possibilities for us securing that water, what grants, whether state or federal, or there are some, I guess, that are more, I guess you would call them private sources that we might qualify for. We actually, about 2 years ago, if I remember right, we brought the SDAO funding specialist, came here and talked to the board so we have an idea of what we would have to do if someone called tomorrow and said, here's land we want to sell that's in the watershed. What would we have to do to come up with that? Well, 8 years ago, $6 million. We also had loan officers from, I believe it was 2 different coastal banks that were willing to make loans on that kind of property. And what that would entail, most of that is the first step would be getting more contemporary evaluation of the land, which in itself is very costly. We just received a grant last year that could pay for some of that. We're looking into that. There's been talk, someone brought to the board the idea of, what is it called, conservation easements. And I know earlier it was mentioned recreation and that sort of thing in these areas. Well, how would we manage that? How would we be responsible for trails, for just so that the public could use it? I mean, it's beautiful up in there. So that's where we are right now, to try to guarantee as best as possible that the water that reaches the plant is as clean as we can possibly hope for when it reaches the plant. Understanding that, yes, there are mudslides. I mean, look where we live. It's raining at my house right at the moment. I mentioned the leaves in the streams that the tannins come out, that sort of thing. But we can deal with that. We have a very small, we're a small district. We have 5 commissioners and 3 3¾ employees on the books. So we have a lot of chiefs. But we're good, and we're very proud of it. We produce very good water. And part of that is because it's fairly clean for the most part when we get it. But that's because, like I said, our general managers enter into negotiations to try to get like the no spraying, for instance. That's what we do. That's where we hope to go. We hope to be able to purchase those lands at some point, or enter into really long-term agreements where the wetlands are managed in a different way than they have been, shall I say, over time. You know, and that's what drives us. There's a saying here in Neskowin that the only way you get land here is to inherit it. Personally, I married well. My wife's family had it. So, and you know, and I have grandkids that we love having over here, and we want, you know, when we're gone in 10 or 20 years, all the
Wife's maiden name, ?
that we have that water be clean. So if you have any questions, my best suggestion, we have a pretty good website, or call us. Our general manager, Troy Trout, is always available for questions, and he'll get you the information you want. And thanks for having us.
So are we doing any follow-up questions quickly, if there's 1 or 2 for Stephen?
Are there?
Sarah?
Yes, Guy.
Guy, yeah, this is Guy Sievert. I just want to add a couple of things. First of all, I think we're really fortunate here in Neskowin with our water board, first under the leadership of Gene Cameron when this all first started, and now Steve, that they've been forward-looking in taking actions, investing their own time and money in how do we protect our source water area. And so I think we're very fortunate for that. One of the things that the board, in their engagement with some of the property owners up there, the largest property owner was being managed by Hancock Forest. Unfortunately, as you heard earlier in our presentation tonight, or in the meeting tonight, that Weyerhaeuser has just recently purchased that land from Hancock. And we were told that Hancock was actually leaning towards some kind of an agreement with the Neskowin Water Board to either own or control in some way that land up there in the Hawk Creek watershed. So unfortunately for us, and I don't know if Steve hasn't heard this news yet. I just heard it a few days ago, and you heard Commissioner Yamamoto. That's what led to that question. So we, in some ways, with the board's leadership, have to kind of start all over again with a different company, and a company that has some different management practices. The other thing I want to add real quickly is that the governor, Governor Brown, has put together a group representing all stakeholders on these issues of protecting drinking water. And they have, I think she gave them 18 months, and that started last year. And they are to come with an agreement of how to protect drinking water, especially coastal drinking water, where we have such an interface of industrial timber activities and water plants. So everybody's kind of waiting for that. And it's for those of you who may know, one of our neighbors, Peter Kohler in Neskowin, is the person that the governor selected to mediate that whole process. So he's clearly familiar with Neskowin and has historical ties to Neskowin. Anyways, but thanks, Steve, and I don't know if Jean's on too, but and all the other board members for your leadership on this.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so we are right on time. So our last panelist is Charlie Ciecko to talk about securing our natural resources. Welcome, Charlie.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. So as I thought about my topic, which is securing our natural resources, I knew I had to distill things down to cover it all in 10 minutes. And I kind of came to the conclusion that there's basically two approaches to protect our natural resources. The first one is through regulation. And I know regulations can be very controversial. Many citizens may think that regulations are something that government does to us. I, on the other hand, kind of believe that regulations are something that our government does for us to protect public trust resources like our public health and safety and our public trust resources, which I might define as water quality and air quality and fish and wildlife resources, wetlands, and the like. So making decisions about regulations is usually pretty contentious. So to get the most out of protecting resources through regulation, I would say the most important strategy is for citizens to engage. And by that, I mean, we need to get informed about the issues and candidates and what their priorities are. We need to vote. We need to participate in meetings like this, attend hearings, write letters, reach out to our policymakers at whatever level. We need to support nonprofits that share common goals with us. I mean, a lot of us are just too busy to really learn the intricacies of all these different issues, but there are a lot of nonprofits out there who study them on a daily basis. And if you feel comfortable, support them, let them speak for you, let them tell you when it's appropriate to speak up. It's very important. And then, you know, I have to say at this point, I'm so impressed to see the number of people participating here tonight. It's truly amazing for a small community like Neskowin. I want to say too, and I'll just say this in response to my friend David Yamamoto. David and I have a history in Tillamook County, but I also just want to say when special interests dominate the process, the results can have a negative impact on the public interest. And rather than trying to do any debate here, I would direct people to 3 recent articles that were put together by the Oregon Public Broadcasting, and ProPublica about the management of private timberlands in Oregon. I think those articles would give a different perspective. And there's also a number of timber management firms that are totally turning the traditional forest management model on its head and doing things much differently. But that's maybe a conversation for another time. At the same time, regulations can only go so far, and we have to recognize what limitations are. And under Oregon law, we have a thing called Measure 49, which basically says if you deprive a landowner of all the economic use of his property or prevent them from performing an approved agriculture or forest practice, they're going to be entitled to compensation. So it's a tough balance that policymakers have to find here. So I don't know what the thresholds are for Measure 49. I'm sure Sarah does, but when it comes down to it, when regulations are insufficient to achieve adequate protection, then ownership may become the desired goal. There's a couple of kinds of ownership that can be pursued. The first is fee ownership or fee simple ownership. And basically that's full ownership, and it's usually through purchase from a willing seller. I say usually because some public entities have the authority to acquire lands through eminent domain. It is not popular. It is certainly not the preferred way to go about it. But I've been aware of situations where a seller may want to have that threat. I'm not exactly sure why, or it may help bring a seller to the negotiation table to do then a fair market willing seller kind of deal. The other type of ownership is partial ownership, and that would come through a conservation easement, which Steve mentioned briefly. And a conservation easement is a legally binding voluntary agreement between a landowner and a government or a nonprofit where a specific right, for example, timber rights, is conveyed for compensation or potentially donated for tax benefit that might accrue from making a donation. And a conservation easement is attached to the deed, so it runs with that deed to whoever the owner is. So potential owners of conservation easements can include local governments, special districts, city, county, state governments, nonprofits like land trusts or conservation groups. Nature Conservancy is an example of that, Trust for Public Land. And then there's private for-profit companies. And I want to mention one here. It's called Ecotrust Forest Management, which is it's a for-profit company that buys and manages forests in an entirely new way. And they manage it to take into account all the ecosystem services that a forest can provide, including carbon sequestration, water quality, wildlife habitat, and they make money doing it. They make a very nice return for their investors. And lastly, there's partnership opportunities where you may have multiple owners with potentially different management priorities, and a forest collaborative would be an example of that. So once you decide what vehicle you want to pursue and you maybe have a willing seller, then the most difficult part of the equation is funding. And I just want to say you should never expect someone else to fund your project. Expect to cover the bulk of the cost with locally raised funds. And the source of these funds might include a capital bond measure. And a capital bond measure is presented to the voters of a district or a county or whatever, and they decide whether or not they want to raise their property taxes for a given period of time to pay off a long-term debt. Second would be a tax levy, which is a shorter term type of instrument that's also put before the voters, and they agree to raise their property taxes for a shorter period of time to either accumulate money for a given purpose or possibly to pay off a short-term loan. And lastly, well, it's not lastly, but then there's revenue bonds, and revenue bonds basically depend on a dedicated stream of revenue. If we were going to talk about, you know, the Neskowin Water District, there might be an increase in water service fees and the incremental increase used over time to pay off a debt, possibly to buy land or, you know, or to do capital improvements. Then there's grants, and grants come in a variety of different forms from a variety of different locations. They come from state and federal organizations or agencies, and they come from private foundations when local funds are available. And at the federal level, we have community development block grants, which might be a source. There's a community forest and open space conservation program at the federal level. In Oregon, we have the Oregon Safe Drinking Water Revolving Fund, which is a loan. We have Drinking Water Source Protection Fund. I think that's a loan, but it might be a grant. And then we also have the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, which doles out grants. And I think if there was a clear connection between a project that would support fish and wildlife, OWEB is a potential source. And then finally, there's the Oregon Water Resources Department, which I believe may have some grant or loan funds available. Lastly is crowdsourcing, and that's when a community comes together without increasing their taxes, and they basically raise funds on a private basis for a specific project, and then they use that in conjunction with grants. Like any real estate project, the price of the property is just part of the cost, and you have to be prepared to cover all the soft costs, which include things like your appraisal, your timber crews, survey, legal fees, title insurance, closing costs, and the list goes on. It can be a very significant portion of the acquisition. And lastly, once you've purchased it, you need funds to provide for the stewardship and maintenance of what you've just acquired. So you really need to think this through. You have to have a long-term plan, and you have to be really committed to it. So I'm going to give you two quick examples. And the first one is up on the North Coast in the vicinity of Oswald West, where the North Coast Land Conservancy is about to close the acquisition of 3,500 acres called the Rainforest Reserve. And this unique approach involved the Timber Investment Management Organization I referred to, Ecotrust Forest Management, and they bought the land initially and made an arrangement with North Coast Land Conservancy, gave them a number of years to raise $10 million, which included the money to do the fundraising, have a stewardship fund, and pay Ecotrust Forest Management for the land. They will probably close this year. It's an amazing feat for a small organization like North Coast, and that's called a bridging investment. And then the other one, you know, is right in our own backyard in Neskowin, where one of our most prized open spaces, the Neskowin Beach Golf Course, is basically being purchased, you know, through the efforts of some committed and very talented citizens who have come together to raise money to purchase this valuable open space. And I might add, during the winter, it's a very valuable wildlife habitat resource, you know, for the benefit of the community. So I'll end there. I will point out, I think there's some links to some resources, but one I want to mention is the Community Forest Handbook, which is put out by the Northwest Community Forest Coalition. Thanks a lot.
Now's the Q&A time. Are there any questions for Charlie?
No, I'm not seeing any, Brenda.
Okay, then this is the open time. I give it back to you, Ran and Chris, and to do the general Q&A and wrap up. We're good. We're, you know, end when you want to. We made it through the speech. I give it to you guys now to wrap up and complete when you want. I'm not timing anymore.
Okay. Let's see. Am I unmuted? There we go. Well, that was quite a variety of perspectives and subject matters that are very deep and were covered very quickly. And I really appreciate that that our presenters were able to condense their information and present it in a 10-minute period. I wish there were more questions coming up here, but all I can say is that we appreciate it. And a number of the sources that were referred to, some of them were on the printed agenda that we put out for you. And we will have these on the website, and only Biff can tell us when they will appear. Some are already on the reference and archive page, but these things will migrate there soon. So if you want to pursue some of these subject matters further, we hope that you will go to the archive reference page on the website and dig in a little and find out more about these natural resource areas. So I would say thank you all for coming, hanging in there through this. And if you have questions, info@neskowincac.org, you can send us questions. We've been getting questions pretty regularly lately. And we appreciate your interest in asking questions, and we'll answer best we can or refer to you who we believe might be able to help answer the question, or often that's the county. So Sarah may hear from folks, and I think everyone's open to that question and answer. As David mentioned, just everyone wants to help and they have a lot of information. So I hope you take advantage of that and learn more about this subject as we go on. I'd like to thank Brenda specifically for hosting this. Brenda was the one who came up with a format for both our general meetings and for informational town halls. She hosted the first number of meetings until we got our own hosting capabilities, and Biff provided that film work for the watershed, Hot Creek Watershed. We've done some amazing things in a short amount of time with the talented people of our community. And I think that comes up time after time, how people pitching in together, we get a lot of great things done and share a lot, which is part of becoming a community. So really appreciate you coming out, and I hope you'll stay tuned. And for the next meeting, I wish I had that on my fingertips. And Chris or Brenda, maybe you can pitch the next informational town hall, since I don't have that in front of me. Maybe they don't either. So
I think it's probably the third Tuesday in February.
okay. So
And stay tuned, because if you're registered, you're now on the list, right? So
right.
There will be information forthcoming soon.
We'll send you a reminder. So thank you all. And unless Chris has something to say, I'll wish you good night and thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, Rand, just one question came in.
Okay.
Let's see. Can you say exactly what public entity purchases and owns the Hot Creek watershed for the water district?
Could you? I'm not sure I got that.
Can you say exactly what public entity purchases and owns the Hot Creek watershed for the water district?
Oh, who would do that?
Rand, could I help with that?
Sure.
Okay. So, and I don't know if Steve's still on, that's why I'm jumping in here, but the water district would own the land. The Water District Board had actually talked to a company called Trout Mountain, how to manage that land for conservation purposes, the main purpose being the protection of source water for Neskowin. So the district would own the land. It would be managed by a timber management or land management company that specializes in this kind of thing, kind of like the Ecotrust forest that Charlie mentioned earlier. They manage their land for conservation purposes. It wouldn't mean that it would mean that the land would be actively managed. There could be some harvesting in certain areas up there, to help pay for the management of the land, other kinds of things. But its primary purpose would be to protect the drinking water that before it comes into the pipe, protect that water before it comes to the plant. So yeah, owned by the district, managed by probably a third party.
Thank you, Guy.
I couldn't have said that better.
We thought Troy, can't you picture Troy in a kind of a lumberjack outfit? I mean, up there with a big saw.
I have one. I will do that.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to end with that. And I really appreciate you all coming out and joining us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Good night.